Writing. Javier Morales adjusted the cuffs of his faded blue shirt before stepping into the gleaming headquarters of Alvarez Automotive Group. The polished marble floors reflected the expensive lights above, making him feel as though every scuff on his worn shoes was impossible to hide. He had repaired engines for nearly 17 years, but this was the first time he had ever applied for a position in a company this prestigious. Losing his old job when the neighborhood garage closed had forced him to look beyond familiar streets. His savings were almost gone, his mother's medical bills continued to arrive every month, and he desperately needed steady work. The waiting room was filled with younger applicants wearing tailored suits and carrying expensive laptops. They chatted confidently about advanced diagnostic software, electric vehicle systems, and the newest certifications. Javier quietly listened while holding the small folder that contained his certificates, recommendations, and photographs from workshops he had attended over the years. He knew technology mattered, but he also knew that many problems could still be solved by patience, careful observation, and years of practical experience. When his name was finally called, he entered the interview room with a respectful smile. Across the table sat Ricardo, the company's human resources director. Beside him were two supervisors taking notes on tablets. The interview started well enough. How many years have you worked as a mechanic? Almost 17. Have you repaired hybrid engines? Yes. What about luxury European vehicles? I've worked on many. The supervisors nodded with approval. Javier felt hopeful. Then Ricardo placed a thick booklet on the table. We'll now begin the technical examination. The questions became increasingly specific. They focused on serial numbers, software codes, exact sensor locations, and technical references that mechanics usually searched for in manuals rather than memorized. Javier answered many correctly, but several questions left him uncertain. He had never been the kind of mechanic who memorized hundreds of codes. Instead, he listened to engines, studied vibrations, examined tiny clues, and relied on experience. 40 minutes later Ricardo closed the booklet. I'm sorry, Mr. Morales. You scored below our minimum requirement. Javier remained calm. I understand. He stood, thanked everyone for their time, picked up his folder, and quietly left the room. As he walked through the lobby, he overheard another applicant whisper to his friend. I guess old-school mechanics are becoming obsolete. The words stung, but Javier kept walking. Outside, he looked at the cloudy sky and sighed. He wasn't angry. He was simply disappointed. He wondered how he would tell his mother that another opportunity had slipped away. At that very moment, a sleek black sedan pulled into the company's underground entrance. Valeria Alvarez stepped out. At 38, she had transformed her late father's small repair shop into one of the country's largest automotive service companies. Employees respected her because she demanded excellence but rewarded honesty and hard work. As she entered the building, she casually asked Ricardo how the interviews had gone. We've already eliminated several candidates, he replied confidently. Valeria began reviewing the applications. One file immediately caught her attention. Javier Morales. The name seemed strangely familiar. She opened the folder and found an old handwritten recommendation attached to the back. Her eyes widened. The letter had been written years earlier by Ernesto Salgado, the legendary master mechanic who had once mentored her father. She remembered Ernesto's words from long ago. If you ever meet Javier Morales, don't judge him by an exam. Watch him work. Valeria looked up sharply. Where is this applicant? Ricardo shrugged. He failed the written test and left. When? Just now. Without another word, Valeria hurried toward the elevators. Employees stared in disbelief as the company's wealthy owner rushed through the lobby. She reached the front entrance just as Javier was crossing the parking lot. Mr. Morales. He continued walking, assuming she meant someone else. Javier. He turned around. Valeria approached, slightly out of breath. Please, would you come back inside? I'd like to speak with you. Javier looked surprised. I thought the interview was over. It is. And I didn't pass. That's exactly why I need to speak with you. Curious, Javier followed her back into the building. Inside a private conference room, Valeria placed Ernesto's recommendation on the table. Did you know him well? Javier smiled warmly. He taught me almost everything I know. He once told my father that you could diagnose problems most mechanics would never find. Javier lowered his eyes. He was generous with his compliments. Valeria folded her hands. I'd like to test that myself. Minutes later they entered the company's main workshop. Parked in the center stood an exotic sports car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The chief engineer explained the situation. This vehicle has an intermittent electrical failure. 5 certified specialists have examined it over the last 2 weeks. None of us has found the cause. Valeria looked at Javier. What would you need? A flashlight. Nothing more. The request puzzled everyone. Javier slowly walked around the car. He listened to the engine. He gently touched several components. He asked one technician to rev the engine twice. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he crouched near the rear suspension. After removing a protective cover, he pointed toward a thin wire that had been rubbing against a metal bracket. When the engine vibrates at a certain speed, this wire briefly loses contact. That's your problem. The engineers exchanged skeptical glances. One of them replaced the damaged wire. The engine was started again. The fault disappeared instantly. They tested the car repeatedly. The problem never returned. Silence filled the workshop. Several engineers stared at Javier with open admiration. Ricardo stood speechless. Valeria smiled. I believe Mr. Salgado was right. She turned toward Javier. I'd like to offer you a position as senior diagnostic specialist. Javier didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question. Would I be hired because I fixed one car, or because you believe experience deserves a chance? Valeria appreciated the honesty. The second reason. Javier nodded slowly. Then I'd like to make one request before accepting. What is it? I don't want future applicants judged only by written examinations. Some excellent mechanics aren't good at memorizing codes. Let them prove themselves with their hands. Valeria looked around the workshop. Several employees quietly lowered their heads. She realized he was right. That afternoon she called an emergency meeting with every department manager. Starting immediately, every technical applicant would complete both a written assessment and a practical demonstration. No candidate would ever again be rejected without being allowed to show real ability. The policy quickly transformed the company's hiring process. Within months, talented technicians who had previously struggled in interviews began joining the organization. Repair quality improved dramatically. Customer satisfaction reached record levels. Javier became known not only for solving impossible mechanical problems but also for patiently teaching younger employees. Whenever an apprentice made a mistake, he never raised his voice. Instead, he smiled and said, every expert was once a beginner who broke something. The workshop became a place where people learned instead of fearing failure. One afternoon a nervous young trainee accidentally damaged an expensive engine component. The young man expected to be fired. Instead, Javier helped him repair the mistake. Machines can be fixed, he said. Confidence is harder to repair. Don't lose yours. Word of Javier's kindness spread throughout the company. Employees from different departments often visited the workshop simply to ask for advice. Even experienced engineers sought his opinion on difficult cases. Yet Javier never acted superior. Whenever someone praised him, he replied, the engine deserves the credit. It always tells you what's wrong if you're willing to listen. Valeria often watched these interactions from her office balcony overlooking the workshop floor. She realized that hiring Javier had changed far more than repair statistics. He had changed the company's culture. Months later, during the annual company celebration, Valeria stood before hundreds of employees. She announced a new nationwide apprenticeship program for experienced workers over 40 who had been overlooked because of age, educational background, or poor interview performance. The audience applauded enthusiastically. She then invited Javier onto the stage. Embarrassed by the attention, he reluctantly accepted. A journalist covering the event asked Valeria, "What has been your greatest business decision?" She smiled. "Running after the man we almost rejected." The crowd laughed before applauding again. Then the reporter turned to Javier. "What lesson would you like people to remember from your story?" Javier looked across the room at dozens of mechanics, engineers, receptionists, and apprentices. He spoke quietly, yet every person listened. A test can measure memory. A resume can summarize experience. But neither can fully measure character, determination, or wisdom earned through years of honest work. Before you reject someone, give them the opportunity to show what they can actually do. You might discover that the person walking away from your door is exactly the one capable of changing your future. The room erupted into applause. Many employees later admitted those words stayed with them long after the celebration ended. From that day forward, every new applicant entering Alvarez Automotive Group noticed a framed plaque hanging in the reception area. It contained a single sentence inspired by Javier's journey. Talent is not always found in perfect answers. Sometimes it is found in experienced hands waiting for one fair opportunity. No visitor ever walked past those words without reading them. And no manager in the company ever forgot the day a wealthy businesswoman ran across a parking lot to stop the mechanic she had almost allowed to disappear forever.